Call the meeting to order at 5:16. Joining. I'll read the little spiel here. The town of Lunenburg, in accordance with the requirements of open meeting law, please be advised this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. The town of Lunenburg, in response to COVID-19, is currently following guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread. All town facilities are open by appointment only. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. Hello, everyone. Is there any public comment from the committee before we get started? See none. Is there any public comment from the public? Okay. Again, don't have any minutes for approval at this point. So dive into the discussion on fiscal policies related to the capital planning and projects. Dave, this is kind of your request from the FinCom. Do you have anywhere you want to start, or Heather, do you want to walk us through it? How do you guys want to go about this?
Yeah, I think we've had some brief discussion that, in the past, that for the most part, it's probably the dollar amount and maybe some wording in the section 3.02 capital budget section. Right off in the first paragraph is the $10,000 number. And then I also circled life of 3 years or longer. It just kind of struck me this afternoon when I was reading this that, life of 3 years, you could be talking about a weed whacker and, things like that lumped together in a project. Is there any interest in changing that time frame at all? And I just throw it out there. I don't have a feeling either way. It just came to mind as I read the paragraphs.
Well, just before we get too far into it, for anyone listening, we're talking about the Board of Selectmen policies, and we're looking to make a recommendation if we were going to change those at all. So any decision we make, still, it's not our decision to make. We have to pitch it to somebody else. So.
Yeah, it's more a recommendation than anything.
Yeah, this is the Board of Selectmen policies. We're talking section 3.02. And that'd be page 36, 37, 38 of the document if anyone's trying to reference that.
Right.
Okay. So was it just a dollar amount in the year, really? Was there anything else, Dave, that we should keep on the radar?
Well, then it carries into paragraph 2 with the same dollar amounts that if we make a change in one, I think we should in 2, or at least visit that. Excuse me. And then, let's see, goes to section B, paragraph 1. I just wrote a note next to asking for an explanation as to the sentence. This includes projects proposed but not yet acquired in prior fiscal years and those projects proposed during the current fiscal year. That just seemed to be, I don't know, a very cloudy statement to me. I don't know if the town manager could shed some light on that as to why it's bridging 2 fiscal years.
I think that just means old projects, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Just talking about things that the departments submitted that are from multiple years, so they would be included for further years if they weren't already addressed in prior years. That's basically just a running list.
Right, so it's what we're doing already. Okay,
yep.
That's fine.
All right.
And Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Just again, for the people at home, since Mr. Passio is focused on the section A, number 1, since it's one sentence, I'll just read it. So capital projects, also referred to as capital assets, are any tangible item that costs $10,000 or more and has a useful life of 3 years or longer. Just number 1, I wanted people to know that that's what the actual sentence is, but also to Mr. Passio's point about the useful life, the weed whacker wouldn't apply because it has to be both. It has to be $10,000 or more and has a useful life. So the weed whacker may have a useful life of 3 years, but I'm sure it's not going to be $10,000. I hope We've been getting really good weed whackers. But
I can find a government contract that'll do that. Sorry, couldn't resist.
I do agree with Mr. Passios that those are the two major areas of focus would be the dollar amount, and it does spill over into section A, number 2, because it talks about the same
Yes,
cap.
but that's
So
the crux of what we're trying to look at right now. Is, again, and where this was kind of brought up in the first place, because it's been $10,000 for as long as I know. So $10,000 isn't what it used to be. That's kind of my reason of looking at it.
Yep.
Heather, did you have any input on, again, we're trying to make this more streamlined and kind of easy for you to operate things. So do you have any input or recommendations?
I did a little research on other towns and what they use for their thresholds. The towns that I looked at were Harvard, Bolton, Ashburnham, Groton, Hadley, and Westminster. They all ranged between 15,000 and 25,000. My preference would be to do an incremental change, either 15 to 20,000 at this point, and maintain the 3 years.
Okay. So I see Paula's got her hand up.
Yeah, so my question is, Heather, in budgeting and the process you've gone through the last several years, do you feel that a small department with a capital expenditure of $10,000, that could be absorbed in their budget?
So this, yeah, we discussed this, I think, at a previous meeting. We have never done it that way. So that was my concern of doing a large increase, is the fluctuation from year to year for different departments and what the impact that would have overall on the budgeting process. Because their departments are given target budgets, which are baseline budgets with contractual salary, personnel increases, and other known contractual increases. But outside of that, they'd have to justify any other increase. So looking at a small department, say a $10,000 capital outlay, I guess it would depend on the other requests by other departments.
Okay. Thank you. My concern is, I understand the reasoning behind it, but my concern is whether or not departments will in fact be able to absorb something like that in their budget, because historically budgets have really focused on, as the town manager just said, they've basically stayed, steady, and the increases would be contractual obligations. So I understand the rationale, but I want to make sure the funding is there if we do make this type of change.
Yeah, that's kind of why I would lean towards, like Heather said, incrementally doing this, trying for a small increase now, understanding we might want to raise it more in the future. But I'd be a little bit worried about raising it too high all at once, because that is a big difference for some of the smaller departments. Anyone else have a feeling or want to throw out a recommendation for a number that they think would be appropriate?
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
So I think my take on this is a little different than other people's and how it would be addressed. So to the previous point, that could smaller departments absorb it in their budget, that isn't the mechanism or the way that I think that any change we would implement would be affected. At least that's not the way I had foreseen it. I think if we raised it to whatever it is, 20 or 25,000. The point is that this committee, the capital planning committee, would not prioritize it. But the budget, the money that we're spending and the items that we prioritize this year would just not all of them that fell below that threshold would be done by this committee. But the town manager and the finance team could certainly say, hey, there are other capital items that are at more of their discretion, but they don't rise to committee discretion to prioritize. They wouldn't come out of the operating budget of those departments, but they would be annual budgetary awards, for lack of a better word, to those departments for the same projects. It just wouldn't go through the capital planning committee for it. So, I mean, that's the way I look at it. So you'd have, the money would be the money. And how it gets distributed would be differently, that's all. The mechanism that we would use, whether we had a capital planning article and then we had a separate capital article from the town manager, or whether we combine them all into one capital article. I just don't see that the need for a committee like ours to be, you know, evaluating projects under $10,000. They should be well in the discretion of the town manager and the budget finance director and the whole budget team, in my mind. And it shouldn't impact the operating budgets of those departments. It would be awarded just like it is here. Just the approval would come in a different way. That's all.
To me, I understand what you're saying, Tom, but to me, my concern is, and some of the things we've talked about, like, for example, the vehicles, which are on a rotating schedule for the public safety. I absolutely agree that those should just be a budget item, because it's basically a vehicle rotation schedule and it should be part of their budget. But my concern is a smaller department, and I understand what you're saying is it could be a separate line item, but it just changes the entire processes for departments that are smaller, that now need to go to the finance committee and go to the town manager and justify an increase. It's just a different process, and I want to make sure that we roll it out that way. Some things I think should become part of budgets, and I think Dave Passios mentioned this during when we talked about the vehicles for the police department. But other things I'm concerned about, when you have a small budget and then you're looking at a major expenditure, it's just a justification process that's very different than what we've experienced before. And personally, I would rather go lower than higher. I would like to see between 15 and 20. I wouldn't want to go up to 25.
Wendy, you've had your hand up for a while. Did you want to chime in?
Similarly, I think that 15 to 20,000 range, and as we had talked about, moving incrementally. But I guess my question, and being new the first year on this committee, how typical is it to see projects under 10,000? I mean, Eagle House perhaps has some, just, you know, because we, you know, as to Paula's point, you know, a smaller department. How typical are the less than 10K projects to begin with?
Well, I guess that'd be a question for Heather, because they never really make it to us because they're under 10,000. So how often do you handle?
Or I say 10, between 10 and 15,000, just over 10,000. What we would kind of be backing out of this range, say if we brought it to 15 next year.
Majority of the projects are well over that amount. I looked at going out the next few years. So in fiscal 23, there will be one 10,000 request, one $15,000 request. And in fiscal 24, there's one $20,000 request. And in fiscal 25, there's one 12,000 requests, one $16,000 request, and one $11,000 request. So between 1 and 3.
So what do you do now if somebody has a project that's like $9,000? Do they just eat it in their budget, or do you find money somewhere else for it, or what do you do now? It's just under.
So the best example of that would be facilities, and so it would be within their operating budget.
Mhm.
Most other large purchases, I can think of the voting booths was one, so that was for the town clerk. But normally it's a reoccurring cost going forward.
But if the senior center needed like $8,000 or something, are they just,
That would come out of the facilities.
facilities would handle it?
Mhm.
Okay. So if we increase the threshold, it's probably just going to push most projects will probably get pushed to that facilities, right? I feel like that's where most of the small projects are.
Yes.
Damon, if I could through you to the town manager, in your tenure here in Lunenburg, do you recollect, and I haven't checked back through it, but do you recollect a year that we haven't used some money from the budget raised and appropriated for capital expenditures to fund the capital budget?
No, it's every year it's been a combination, including tax revenue.
Right.
That's didn't used to be that way, right?
Well, I think it's been that way for quite a while. And my point being
Not to the same.
that if we take these smaller projects away from, move them away from the capital planning process in this committee, then that money there is part of the raise and appropriate and part of the budgetary money that, you know, small amounts could be shifted towards, say, facilities, which I agree, most of these real small projects would end up in facilities. And we've talked for many years about the need to continue to support and build the facilities funding to maintain our buildings and so on. So, you know, it would tend to shift some of that raise and appropriate money into the budget where it doesn't have to be scrutinized by this committee and gives, I believe, the department heads a little more flexibility. Not everybody will see it that way, but that's my point.
Tom?
So I want to just clarify, if most of the, and before I clarify, I'll ask the town manager to, all those lists that you gave over the next coming years of those items less than 20,000, are most of them, you didn't identify what they were, but are most of them facility?
I haven't opened anymore, but yes, I know the two in fiscal 23 were facilities. I believe the one in 24 was engineering related for infrastructure related under DPW. And I think maybe two out of the three in 25 were.
So my point being is that if the concern is that it's going to make smaller departments' budgets fluctuate, well, that doesn't seem to be true. We'll have the facilities line item would fluctuate, but we would expect that to fluctuate because they're facilities. So I don't see what the objection is just on that particular note that was brought up, at least.
Heather, does,
That doesn't preclude anyone coming forward. These are ones that we already were made aware of. That
Fair
No.
enough.
Does
but I
it-
mean,
does raising this number help you, Heather? Or does it put you in an awkward spot when you're put to be the sole decision maker? Are we a good buffer for these things, or are we a hindrance?
no, I mean, I think the process works. I think raising it to a certain level, it's gonna require me to change my budget process a little bit. And evaluating those types of needs for departments.
Mhm.
So, and given our, limited revenues.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if you'd entertain a motion, I'm ready to make one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I move that we increase the dollar amounts in the capital projects paragraphs, section 3.02A, paragraph 1 from 10,000 to 20,000. And paragraph 2, the two mentions of 10,000 also in that that sentence to 20,000.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, take a vote on it in the order that I see you. Dave?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Wendy?
Aye.
Paula?
I,
And I for myself. And that's, well, unless you move to recommend that we change it. So how would we?
Yeah, I should have stated that. It is a recommendation. I'm sorry.
So do we attend a finance committee meeting? Does Heather, do we just write an email? How do we, what's the process moving forward here?
I think finance was anticipating a recommendation from the capital planning committee.
Do they need us present or just
I'm sure that would be of assistance if at least one representative from the committee. But Dave, can be the representative, I guess.
Yeah, I am a representative of the finance committee. I don't know, there may be some questions that pop up from this. This coming Thursday, I noticed there's just a blanket item on the agenda that says policy. I believe that's when it's going to be, at least the discussion is going to start. And my intent anyway, from the pushing it to the finance committee over the past few months was to get by the budgetary season as best we could, and then start talking about reviewing the entire fiscal policy to bring a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen in the future.
Yeah. All right, well, if it's this Thursday, I don't think I'm gonna be able to make it, but
I
I
think
have-
if we just in one way or another pass on what our recommendation for the dollar amounts are, and that we saw no need for any other changes, I think the finance committee will be good with that. And I
Sure.
can bring, I can pass around to you guys if a very important question comes up, and we can deal with it afterwards.
Sure. Seems acceptable to me. All right,
Before we close the meeting, while we're talking about this sections of the policy, I'd like to just take a very quick look. I asked the town manager actually to take a look at the last sentence in paragraph E. And there has been some talk about possibly trying to amend the capital plan on town meeting floor. And there has been some information brought forward that other than reducing the dollar amount, that's not possible. But I'm questioning the interpretation of that last sentence where it says amended as necessary to reflect the will of the town meeting and voted on. That's a very, very vague statement, giving town meeting, I believe, quite a bit of power.
Yeah, but
The only thing I haven't done is gone back to the charter, and it may be more specific in there.
yeah, I would assume the charter rules over what the Board of Selectmen policy, so I'm not sure this is the place to be finding an answer to that.
well, Mr. Chair, I could offer an answer to that just from
Sure.
the language there. It talks about that the town manager may modify or add to the list of capital projects that are part of the proposed budget. The last sentence that Mr. Passio said, it says this budget will be presented at the town meeting and amended as necessary, means the budget can be amended, not the projects. So the budget is the money. Town meeting has the ability to amend the budget. They do not have the ability to amend the projects, nor mandate them. So I think it's clear in there that the budget is what town meeting can amend. But I would
Tom,
defer
and I
to
think,
town council on that, so.
yeah, and I agree with you, Tom. I just wanted to, have it stated by somebody, again, somebody's opinion on the record, so that going forward, we've already got legal opinion from town council and, then interpretation from a couple of us. Just going into town meeting, I think it'll just make it a little bit smoother.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay,
Anything that makes town meeting smoother is okay with me.
so did anyone have anything else they wanted to talk about on fiscal policies before we close this one out? All right, do we need to set another meeting or are we good till the fall?
We're going to need to do a 5-minute meeting to approve minutes for this budgetary season.
I suppose we could do that. We Make the chairman
Doesn't have to
clerk
be at
get his hat,
8:30.
back on.
Doesn't have to be a date certain, Mr. Chair. You can certainly just let us know when you need a meeting, when the minutes are done. And
Yeah, I'll try to
May,
get it done
June,
sooner.
Yeah.
Next year, somebody's volunteering to be the clerk. I'm putting my foot down. Okay. Is there any comments from the public before we close? Don't see any hands. Any comments from the committee? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, all in favor in the order that I see you. Dave,
aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Wendy,
Aye.
Paula,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you, everybody.
Night,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.